Okay, let's talk a little bit more about Jesus' response to Peter from Matthew chapter 16, where Jesus' question was, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter's reply was, "I believe you are the Christ, the Son of the living God." We talked about this a little bit last time, but it's too big to do in one segment. Blessed are you, this is verse 17. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And I talked a little bit about last time the fact that Roman Catholic tradition and theology would use this verse in order to make Peter the first pope. I disagree. I'll kind of leave it at that. What I do think is Jesus was saying this statement of faith that Christ is the Son of God. Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. If that's not true, nothing else matters. We don't even have something built around a good teacher, a good man. If that's not true, C.S. Lewis said it more profoundly than I can. Either he was a lunatic from the pits of hell, or he was who he said he was. And if he is who he said he was, the Christ, the Son of God, then everything else about our faith fits. The church is founded on that cornerstone. And I tell you, you're Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades, or hell, will not prevail or overcome it. I learned about this when we were with the other teams from New International who were on our, I don't know what to call it. It was a spiritual retreat on a cruise ship. Sounds awful, but it was great. And anyway, outside of Caesarea Philippi, there is a cave that has been dubbed the gates of Hades. You realize that in ancient pagan cultures, there was a lot of superstition. In fact, virtually all of those pagan religions were just one practice after another of superstition. And the superstition was this cave, the mouth of this cave, was the gate of hell. It's entirely possible that Jesus was standing near that when he asked his disciples who they said he was, and when he said the gates of hell will not prevail against his church, won't overcome his church. Now, I think the world doesn't believe that. I don't even think the church believes that. Because there are days I'm not sure I believe it. I have a strong political opinion that I'm going to try and keep out of what we do here together on Soul Care with Stevie Boy, but if the election goes other than what I hope, I'm going to be bummed. I can see a lot of problems ahead if that happens. But what I have to remind myself this, because I get kind of worked up. Well, let me just say I get really worked up about it emotionally. But here's the truth. Is Jesus still going to be the Christ, the Son of the living God? Will his church still prevail, still endure, where the gates of hell will still not overcome his church? Well, yeah. See, I think that is a universal promise. That although he was speaking to Peter and the other disciples, this is a promise that we can stand with. We can put our hope in. That the church, the gates of hell, will not prevail against his church. I recently read where this is along the lines of spiritual and persecution of the church, that the persecuted church grows exponentially as opposed to the not persecuted church. In America, I've said this before, if we are inconvenienced, we take that as persecution. And in our comfort, becoming a little uncomfortable, we can shrug that off. We can make that go away. But in the actual persecuted church, no, you can't shrug that off. And they can't make it go away. Right now in India, there's a horrible persecution of the Mid-India Christian Mission. It's the Lal family. And in your prayer time, just a prayer for God to protect and preserve the Lal family, who are the indigenous Indian leaders of the Mid-India Christian Mission. The Hindus have become violent toward them. So they're persecuted. But under persecution, I don't know any time that this is not true. The church grows under persecution. In the first century, the church grew under the Roman persecution. And when Constantine decided to become a Christian, and I think it was mainly because he didn't want to go to hell, not a bad motive, but I don't think he ever really got down to the more core of how do I live for Jesus. But I don't get to judge Constantine, but I can say when he made Christianity the Roman religion, from that time forward, the growth tapered. But under persecution, it thrived. How is that? Because the gates of hell will not overcome the church. I don't know what your political persuasion is. I don't need to know. But yeah, this democratic republic that we're part of has to be stewarded. And yes, I think we have both the right and responsibility to speak into that, certainly to vote. But whoever wins the upcoming election, the church, Jesus established his church on the truth that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and that church will not be overcome by the gates of hell. I got to remind myself of that. And then he goes on and he says, this is a little confusing. Verse 19, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Is this a promise to everyone, or now we go from the generalized universal promise down to a personal promise to Peter? I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Now, there's another possibility. Realize that it could be that Jesus was saying this to the whole apostles, the 12. If you just look at the syntax, it goes directly back to Peter. I'll give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Well, I don't want to be I haven't converted to Catholicism at all, but I can see how this makes the papistry it sort of makes a little bit of sense. The problem, always the problem, is that when we as humans start tinkering with a divine institution, we always mess it up. But Jesus said it, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. What's he talking about? I think he is most talking about sins forgiven or not. Does a human being have the power and the right to forgive or withhold forgiveness? I don't think so. The apostles never forgave anybody's sins. They pointed to Jesus as the forgiver of sins. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm more than a little baffled by this statement of Jesus to Peter. And then in verse 20, this is also baffling to me. He warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Christ. Why? What? Okay, now, guys, I want to know, who do people say I am? Elijah, one of the prophets, okay. But who do you say I am? You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Don't tell anybody. What? Now, I can see it in this sense. Okay, guys, I want you to know this and believe it, but I want people to see it. The time has not come for us to make a big broadcast of the fact that I am the Messiah. On the day of Pentecost, the terms changed. Now tell everybody that I am the Christ. I also don't think this is a necessarily a get out of jail free card for introverts, where you don't have to talk about Jesus. Let people see him. One of my favorite quotes has been attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, where he said, "Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words." There was that. You see, as Jesus performed his ministry day by day, person by person, it should have become obvious, and it was obvious to those who observed. They were awestruck by it. There was nothing normal about how Jesus did his ministry. All the miracles, the healings, resurrection him raising others from the dead. His own resurrection hadn't happened yet, but all of that pointed to the fact that he really was the Son of God. Now, we get the privilege of proclaiming that he was and is God's Son. He's a living, active God in the flesh, and now God for us. A little tongue-tied about it. I bet some people are, in addition to me, a little tongue-tied on, so how do I talk about Jesus as the Son of God? Right, here's your assignment for this week, should you choose to accept it. You know what an elevator speech is? It's if you had only the time that you spend in an elevator for 4 or 5 floors, what would you say about Jesus? What would you say about his work in your life and the work that you see in Scripture and the work that you see he continues in the world? because we get to proclaim that he is the Christ, the Son of the living God. I'll see you next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.